I am Noah Kruger. I'll be taking you guys through today's vulnerability management webinar. I appreciate you all for being here. So this is our second webinar in our series of 3 that we're conducting this month in October. If you missed any of the previous one, or you want to join our next one, we'll have a quick slide to go over how you guys can register or catch up on any of our previous ones. So a little bit about me. So again, Noah Kruger, I'm an information security analyst here at Axis One. I have 5 years experience in the cybersecurity world. 2 of those I spent on a security operations center, or SOC, where I actually worked the malware alerts, SIM alerts, fixed the tool when it was blocking the applications that the organizations really need. And then I spent a year doing some cybersecurity engineering, more configuring, designing, implementing those cybersecurity solutions. And then the past 2 years, I've been in a governance, risk, and compliance role, where I focus more on the risk assessments, incident response, vendor risk management, vulnerability management, as well as those audit readinesses, such as CMMC or TISAX. So a little bit about our agenda today. I'll briefly touch on Axis One if you are unfamiliar with us. Since we are talking about vulnerability management, I'll be going over some of the common vulnerabilities that organizations are faced with, as well as how we can identify and assess those. And then we'll jump into continuously monitoring for vulnerabilities and remediation. And then we'll wrap it up with some compliance and legal considerations to take into account. And then again, any questions or answers, we'll have some time for those at the end. So a little bit about Axis One. So we offer a wide array of services to help you increase your cybersecurity posture and reduce that attack surface, all the way from the very beginning of your cybersecurity journey, the discovery phase, to all the needs of continuously oversight and governance. Axis One here, we're a trusted partner every step of the way. But for today's call, we're going to dive into just one of the many areas within cybersecurity, which is vulnerability management. So you may be wondering what vulnerability management is, or if you're unfamiliar with it. Vulnerability management is the process of continuously identifying, assessing, prioritizing, as well as remediating those security weaknesses in systems and software within the organization. We do this to reduce the overall risk of those assets. Many organizations may confuse vulnerability management for a pen test. They are similar in a way, though we are attempting to identify those exploits and gaps within our environments, like a pen test would as well. We're not attempting to use those to pivot, gain access to, break anything within the environment, where a penetration test, you would want those additional details on what can be exploited physically. So continuous vulnerability management ensures that we have proactive eyes on glass rather than to responding to any exploited vulnerabilities after it's already been leveraged by an external attacker. So we want to be more proactive rather than reactive when thinking about vulnerability management. Vulnerability management is not a one-time endeavor. It should be a continuous process, similar to the life cycle you see here on the screen. The vulnerability management process starts with the scan and assess, and then we move to prioritizing and remediating, and then finally continuous monitoring and reporting. Next slide here, we will jump into the actual why vulnerability management matters. So many organizations may think patching workstations and servers may fix all their vulnerabilities, or because we have implemented a patching solution that we have no software gaps. While patching is a critical solution within vulnerability management, it is not the single solution. The vulnerability landscape, as you may know, is constantly evolving. New technologies are being made available, such as AI. So attackers are now smarter and more complex than they've ever been. Vulnerability management gives us the insight to the organization's attack surface, which is all the possible entry points an unauthorized user could breach into or extract information from our organization. The attack surface can include physical workstations such as servers or networking equipment. It could be Internet of Things devices, all the way up to any cloud configurations or cloud environments. It could be our external facing websites or our IPs. If an attacker can see those, they will use those and leverage those in any way possible to get what they're after. So many organizations have the mindset because they may be a small to medium business, that means they're less valuable to a cyber attacker. When in reality, small to medium businesses are often targeted more frequently because it's easier for the attacker to gain that access. Small to medium businesses don't have the same resources and defenses compared to those larger organizations that have the larger budgets and can afford those more sophisticated tools to fend off those threats. So with the insights of vulnerability management, it's important that we use every bit of information that we gather to help allocate our resources to remediate and minimize those risks and gaps efficiently and effectively as possible. So what are some of the common vulnerabilities an attacker may look for when targeting our small to medium businesses? One of the most common vulnerabilities that we see faced are missing or outdated operating systems and software updates. These are patches and updates that are published by the vendor to fix vulnerabilities found within their products. Many attackers are aware of the exploits made available from having outdated software, and they will specifically seek those out when conducting their initial reconnaissance or looking for those entry points. Some common examples of these include operating systems that no longer are supported by the vendor or are end of life. Some good examples of these that I'm sure we've all are aware of are like the Windows 2008 or 2012 servers, or workstations such as a Windows 8 operating system still out there. Those no longer receive any updates or support from Microsoft, so they are considered very vulnerable. Other outdated software that we commonly see are browsers such as Chrome and Firefox that are missing updates, haven't been updated for a while, as well as business applications such as Adobe and Photoshop that haven't been updated for some time. Other common vulnerabilities that can't be fixed with regular patching schedules and cadences that we commonly see are disabled or misconfigured Windows registry keys. So these are the keys that store the configuration, the settings and options for the operating system and the applications it uses. An attacker can use a misconfigured registry key to write new code into a system or disable protections such as the anti-malware or the log analyzer. And then once those are disabled, they'll use that to install unwanted programs or their malware, ransomware. So it's important to be on the lookout for those as well. One other common entry point attackers target first to gain that initial unauthorized access are specific open networking ports on systems. Having these ports accessible to the internet exposes the services and softwares or the services and softwares that communicate the outside world, which thus increases the attack surface. So attackers can use those open ports during their reconnaissance to figure out operating system types, software versions, networking roles and information, and then use all of that to plan out their attack. Some common examples of ports that we see involved in a compromise or breach are ports such as 445 for SMB or port 3389 for RDP. So those are the ones most commonly used in remote code execution. So the attacker is remotely executing code without actually physically being on the device. And then the last common vulnerability often overlooked as being included in vulnerability management is actually having weak or reused passwords. These are easily guessable passwords. Attackers can brute force these, so brute forcing is using that list of like a million different potential passwords and just spraying it at an account to crack that and compromise it. So once a password is cracked, if it is used anywhere else in the environment for any other access, now those areas are also compromised. So it is important to enforce strong password policies where applicable, apply MFA where applicable, as well as educating users on best practices for password strength and management. So those are some of the best ways to avoid a compromised account from actually being breached. So we're going to jump into the actual vulnerability management lifecycle. The first phase of the vulnerability management lifecycle includes identifying and assessing what vulnerabilities already exist in our environments. This is accomplished by using a scanning tool to reconnaissance the internal and external environments. So again, in this phase, we are thinking a bit more like an attacker. We're using the similar scanning tools to gain those insights to what are the risk gaps, what are the exploits within our own environment. But so that way we can use those and address those before the threat actor can actually use them against us. Many vulnerability management scanning tools include configurations to run automatic scans at regular cadences, which is very important. We recommend running regular vulnerability scans on either a weekly or monthly cadence, depending on how critical the assets are that are included in those scans. To ensure that we have the most visibility into the attack surface, it's important that we include endpoints, servers, internal and external network ranges. So those are your IPs. We want to include the company website, and we can also scan dark web forums to be included in these vulnerability scans. Once we have scanned and identified the assets covered by vulnerability management and scanning, it's important that we ensure the attack surface is also properly monitored. So implementing and updating an asset inventory can help quickly discover any unauthorized devices on the network. So those scans will show us if there's a new device that we're not normally seeing. We can verify if that is an authorized device or an unauthorized device. As well as our asset inventory, we want to classify assets within there by criticality to their business operations. This ensures that the next phase of our vulnerability management can be carried out efficiently. So what is that next phase? That second phase of vulnerability management lifecycle is prioritizing and remediating the vulnerabilities that we've already identified from our scans or integrations that we've made with our tools. Vulnerability scanning, the tools and platforms will assign each vulnerability identified with multiple different metrics that help us prioritize which ones to remediate first. A common metric that we use as cybersecurity professionals is called the Vulnerability Scoring System, or CVSS, or Common Vulnerability Scoring System, sorry. And that's a framework that we use to assess the severity of a vulnerability. It ranks it on a scale of 0 to 10, with a higher score, so 10 being the most severe. The CVSS score will take into account a vulnerability's exploitability, its complexity to be carried out by an attacker, its remediation level and effort, as well as any collateral damage and impact that may come to other assets within the organization if it were to be exploited. So when we're deciding what vulnerabilities to start prioritizing after they've been identified in our scans, we will commonly use the CVSS score as one of the first metrics to look at. We will also want to focus on vulnerabilities that have been known to be actively exploited and in use by attackers. So the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA or CISA, they keep a list of all the known exploitable vulnerabilities that are currently being used by external attackers, and they'll update that list pretty regularly when and post about updates when they've made them. So that is a good threat feed to follow. Another vulnerability characteristic to help leverage when deciding what vulnerabilities to prioritize is, can the attacker exploit this vulnerability remotely without having any physical access to the device? We'll also want to determine if the vulnerability is on one of our critical systems in the organization. If it is, we want to apply our resources into remediating those vulnerabilities first. Also, earlier I mentioned vulnerability management isn't just about patching, but patching does play a pretty important role in remediating those common vulnerabilities and also the newly released vulnerabilities that the vendors publish, usually monthly. So Patch Tuesday for Windows is a good example. So those patching systems, we want to make sure they are automated. They're automatically applying those new patches and fixes upon release to the operating systems and software. This is a solution that can quickly ensure that risk gaps are being addressed in a timely manner. It's also important to ensure and validate that our patching systems are actually being rescanned by our vulnerability management tools. This verifies that vulnerabilities are actually being remediated by the patching system that actually installs the patches and updates. So there are some vulnerabilities that may not have a patch or update to fix. So what do we do in that case? So a vendor may actually state making updates to settings or applying a compensating configuration will prevent the vulnerability from being exploited. This is a type of fix for a vulnerability that is most commonly associated with having to segment the asset from the network, or actually making limiting access controls within a firewall rule to compensate and prevent that vulnerability from being exploited. So with this, it's important to stay up to date with vendor releases, notes, and as well as following any of the vendor news feeds. This ensures that we promptly implement any compensating controls or workarounds that the vendor suggests, and that we can put them in place when the actual automated updates or patches aren't available. So the last portion of our vulnerability management lifecycle is reporting and continuous monitoring. This ensures that our scan results and data are being reviewed, continuously monitored. That's important because of the constant threat of evolving threats and technologies. It's important that vulnerability data is reported on frequently. So like I said, we want those weekly or monthly scans. And we can also install agents that report vulnerability data in near real time. So the faster we can identify newly released vulnerabilities, obviously the faster we can prevent them from being exploited and used against us. Having these all in one centralized vulnerability management platform, such as Cyrisma or Qualys, Tenable, Rapid7 are very popular vulnerability management platforms and tools. Having all that data in one place ensures that telemetry of scans from either the network, the vulnerability data being reported or collected through an agent or integration that we make with the platform, it all feeds to one place, so that way we can manage it and see it all on one screen, one pane of glass. Because of the possibility of a 0-day vulnerability, a 0-day is also a vulnerability that is so new that the vendor has no patch or fix for it, hence the amount of time that the vendor has to fix it, 0 days. It's important that we see these as soon as possible. We want to monitor affected systems. That way we can verify if there's any associated unusual activity with that system, until the vendor can release a patch or a compensating control. When continuously monitoring detects a vulnerability actively exploited, it's also important that the organization knows how to respond to that. So this is what an incident response plan helps define for your organization. This will define who responds, how they communicate to others on the team or externally, what systems or assets to contain first, so that criticality again, so that way we can prevent the spread or impact of the exploited vulnerability. Every second counts when we are responding to an exploit. It's really important to ensure that the incident response plan is rehearsed with the incident response team on a regular basis, so that way everyone is on the same page. It helps improve response times and efficiency in the face of actual real world event. So the last part of our vulnerability management journey deals with some compliance and legal. So if worrying about your Windows 2012 server being exploited wasn't enough, there are other factors that we want to keep in mind when implementing vulnerability management. Many frameworks, laws, regulations such as HIPAA, PCI, NIST, CMMC, they all require and include controls that deal with vulnerability management, vulnerability scanning at regular intervals, as well as making sure you have documented policies and procedures around the identification and remediation steps. For example, if you have to be HIPAA compliant and you have a vulnerability that leads to a PHI exposure, this can actually lead to fines totaling up to $1.5 million per violation, as well as consequences of losing cyber insurance coverage, or a higher cyber insurance premium, and or incurring fines or legal consequences. So it is important that we document all of our vulnerability remediation efforts, processes, or make sure those are well defined and documented, and that they leave an audit trail. So that way, if there is an investigation that's conducted, that could be the difference between passing or avoiding a fine or ending up with losing any new business contracts. So we want to make sure that is defined. So that is the end of our vulnerability management journey. Again, I appreciate you all being here and for your time. I do hope this gave you a deeper understanding of the importance of vulnerability management, as well as how to properly implement it. If you don't have anything implemented already, or how to build upon any processes you may already have. Like I mentioned in the kind of kickoff of this call, we do have a couple other webinars going on. So since it is October, that is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. If you are interested in one of our other webinars, we do have our very own Angie Gaio, who is our security architect. She's conducting a penetration testing webinar on October 29th. That'll be at 10 a.m. Central. If you happen to miss our previously conducted webinar done by our very own Melanie Vernon, those are posted on our YouTube, as well as if you jumped into this one late and want to catch up, this one will also be posted on YouTube as well. If you want to register for that penetration testing webinar, you can also do that on our Axis One website, similar to how you registered for this one.